Hello, world, and welcome back to another episode of Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. My name is Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle. And today we're going to be talking about episode 11, which is Higher States of Consciousness, I believe, part 1. So, yeah, here we go, moving into the transcendental or the consciousness world. So anyway, let's move right into it with a little quote that you have. Maybe not so little, but Lizelle, you want to take it over?
Hello, world. If you're going to go to higher states of consciousness, you can't go there without William Blake, as John frequently illustrates. So I thought I'll do right to the poem that everybody only knows the first verse from, and share the entire poem throughout this episode. Orgies of innocence. To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. A robin redbreast in a cage puts all of heaven in a rage. A dove house filled with doves and pigeons shudders hell through all its regions. A dog starved at its master's gate predicts the ruin of the state. A horse misused upon the road calls to heaven for human blood. Each outcry of a hunted hare a fibre from the brain does tear. A skylark wounded in the wing, a cherubim does cease to sing. The gamecock clipped and armed for fight does the rising sun affright. Every wolf's and lion's howl raises from hell a human soul. The wild deer wandering here and there keeps the human soul from care. The lamb misused breeds public strife, and yet forgives the butcher's knife. The bat that flits at close of eve has left the brain that won't believe. The owl that calls upon the night speaks the unbeliever's fright. He who shall hurt the little wren shall never be beloved by men. He who the ox to wrath had moved shall never be by woman loved. The wanton boy that kills the fly shall feel the spider's enmity. He who torments the chaffer's sprite weaves a bower in endless night. The caterpillar on the leaf repeats to thee thy mother's grief. Kill not the moth nor butterfly, for the last judgment draweth nigh. That's the first part.
Ooh, yeah, that is a great lead into this episode, because there's that connection of the one with the whole, or I guess, yeah, that's an interesting way my brain just put it, the one with the whole, because we always reference the one, and that's the whole. And whoa. So he begins this episode with this kind of descriptive, prescriptive delineation, I guess, we're trying to make between, like, why are we doing this?
He gives a really long intro. He goes way back to a couple of episodes ago.
Siddhartha, my God. Modal confusion. And
then he ends with where he ended in the previous episode, which was hinting at that he will be looking at the descriptive and the prescriptive states of higher states of consciousness.
Yeah, and this is because he's saying like 30 to 40% of people are transformed in this way through higher states. So there needs to be like some sort of descriptive and some sort of prescriptive description, for lack of a better word, on both of these.
Descriptive is to describe what is happening, and prescriptive is describe why is it rationally justifiable. And around minutes 29 and 30 seconds, he it's like he remembers, like, okay, maybe we should remind ourselves why we're doing this. That is exactly his words. Why are we doing this? And then he comes back to this two different, the descriptive and the prescriptive. So I'm just going to read what he says there.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
So he said, we want a scientifically plausible explanation of what's going on when someone claims enlightenment and radical self-transcendence. So enlightenment like the Buddha, or radical self-transcendence like Plato. Something that gives a good explanation of what's actually happening. So that is the descriptive. What is happening? Describe what is happening. And then the prescriptive is, and it gives a good justification for why someone should follow and be guided by these experiences. So the prescriptive is then to justify, like, yeah. And you can only deduce, I think, the prescriptive from the descriptive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. That's an interesting way of putting it. Because, it's like the prescriptive is explaining why this might be a rational thing. But in order to even come to that, you would have to have some sort of descriptive explanation about what's happening in the brain when when somebody's in these transformational states.
Yeah.
And so the way he's going to break this down is through 3 components that kind of describe what these feel like, in what it feels like to be in these higher states.
Yeah.
And so, just kind of like the way William Blake did that so poetically just now through you, is describing the world. How is the world being experienced? And then how is the self being experienced? And then thirdly, what's the relationship between those experiences of how the world is being experienced and how the self is being experienced?
Yeah. So it's basically what's coming to mind now is the agent arena relationship.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
That's totally. But somehow I feel like, and the world and the self are agents.
The
relationship is the arena.
Oof. It's so interesting. We've been talking a lot about how John's a translator and how he moves us through disciplines, and he's got like the vocabulary that we're able to speak through. And my brain works in biology and then astrology. And so biology goes all the way down to like chemistry, to the atomized, even a little bit of physics, though it wasn't calculus-based physics, but still physics. And then going all the way out for the astrology, which includes astronomy. And so, scaling in my brain is just like, there's so many different levels we can think on. I could be the microbe in my belly, or I could be Jupiter, embodied through Zeus and this archetype that we have for it. So, anyway, I'm getting a little abstract there.
One of the moons of Jupiter. Jupiter has moons, right?
Yeah. I think one of them is called Titan, if I'm not mistaken.
The Titans were the ones. Prometheus is a Titan.
The Titans, that's why Saturn called his children the Titans, because he had to fight up against them. There was something else to that word too, Titan. Oh, they tightened the noose around him or something like that. So it's a weird like play on words. So this 3 components that he's describing: the world, how is the world being experienced? Well, people say that it's vivid and bright and that they feel this oneness with everything. So there's deep integration. And he really emphasizes the word clarity and glorious. The world makes more
Shining.
sense, beautiful and
Yeah.
alive. It's shiny. Yeah.
Yeah. What popped out for me in all of these three is the aliveness, life being vivif- vivif- vivified, vivification, the aliveness of it all. It's
Mm-hmm.
that's what's really popping up for me. Yeah. The shining, of course, but more the aliveness. Everything becomes real, full of
Yeah.
life. That's amore.
Joy. Yeah.
Yes. But
Amor.
that's the
Yeah.
self.
Yeah.
I
So
think
that
that,
is what he uses to describe the self is joy, connection to what is good. And he says that this
mm,
autobiographical sense of narrative is gone. So, and then also we
mm,
have this sati, so this true remembrance of the true self,
mm, mm,
and that this feels like peace, inner harmony. I like how he uses the word concert here too, because harmony and concert,
mm,
profound joy. There's something very musical about this one, flow state, insight.
mm. Oh, it's so weird that you would say that, because one of my favorite meditations of John is based on all the musicality of how everything, you start with I don't know, the rhythm, and then the melody is added and all those things, and it's based on one of the books that he um, Epiphany, something with Epiphany.
Mm.
Well, I can't recall it now. It will come back to me as soon as we stop recording.
Yeah, right.
When-
You'll receive the insight when you're not looking. Well,
but
it's
yeah.
interesting too that this was very musical because in astrology they have something called octaves. I've been trying to get somebody that I know to help me with music and understanding the higher octaves of things, but certain planets are higher octaves of certain
Oh,
inner planets. So, yeah, there's something very interesting about that to me, how he's using words that remind me of music
mm,
and how musicians typically feel that flow state probably much more instantly than a lot of people getting into the groove of their whatever their job like music.
mm,
It seems like people when they practice a
yeah,
lot can just kind of get back
yeah.
right into it. So
I mean, think of drumming.
yeah.
I don't know if you've danced to drums, but it's just like this, and you're in a complete different state, because the drums just like it's like our heartbeat. It just resonates with our heartbeat, and it
Mm-hmm.
just music just speaks from within, without it just speaks like our being is music or musical. And you know there's definitely something musical about reality.
Yeah, yeah. Sam Harris often will go into his meditations with sound, like sound being this thing that
Mm,
it's kind of like thoughts, because everybody's always like, just stop thinking for meditation. That's not what it's about. It's a practice. And
mm,
with sound, you have no control. You cannot control what
mm,
you hear. It just happens and then it's gone. And this is like he's making that relationship with thoughts. And so there's something very interesting about how sound makes us realize that it isn't just that we are our surroundings. I don't know. It's just like it gets very ineffable, right? But there's something about how sound makes us realize that there's a connection with the outer world that originates in the outer world. And even though we're
mm,
perceiving it here, but there's just something about sound that's
mm.
yeah.
Uh, the words that now come to me, because yeah, I ooze Vervaeke nowadays. I mean, obviously, because I'm just watching him everywhere. Is It's not objective, it's not subjective, it's transjective. It's between us
Mm-hmm.
and the world. It's yeah,
Yep. Oh, interesting. Those vibrations. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually the very next one, which was the third component, which would be that relationship of world and self. And so he even like harkens back to conformity theory and
Hmm.
Aristotle. We're going to go further into conformity theory, but the identification with the world, this participatory knowing, seeing into
Mm,
reality, and deep at one ment, sharing
yeah.
identity.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Mm.
Becoming the rhythm of life.
Mm. Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
mention this book
Yeah.
because this is the beauty that becomes apparent when you're in a higher state. Is apparently beautifully illustrated in this book. I'm keeping this book to prime me for receiving beauty on holy sand.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my flight read. I did change my mind.
Yeah.
There was another book, but it's also a technical book, and I was like, no, I'd rather read beauty.
Beauty. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those three components of what it feels like to be in a higher state are often kind of brought about, I guess, or can be brought about by disruptive strategies. So these can be long term, like what Siddhartha did with, like he said, 6 years of meditation, which would be a long term disruptive strategy. Or it can be short term, which are going to be things like starvation, celibacy, sleep deprivation, drumming, even chanting, and psychedelics.
Yeah, I just want to refer to this book again. He also
Mm-hmm.
in this refers to this again. So the long term, he says meditation and contemplation like Siddhartha. He does not mention what this book does mention, the long term priming effects of the Christian tradition or other religions like that, their role, like prayer and praise and worship, so singing and dancing, and how that can also prime you for these higher states of consciousness.
Yeah, it reminds me of meditation, first of all, that being disruptive, because usually for me now, when I go into meditation, it's a time when I'm like, I don't have time for this. It's like, okay, then sit your ass down and do it.
Yeah,
Because it's a disruptive strategy that I have.
yeah,
Or like people going for a walk, people taking a shower, like anytime it's like, just sit on this, don't act on it. It's so interesting how going against what you feel programmed to do
mm,
is disruptive, even if it's something just as simply as, I mean, I always continue to go back to the faith of Islam and how prayer call 5 times a day, like no matter what you're doing, get up,
mm-hmm,
go pray. It's like so interesting. Or Ramadan, the fasting
yeah,
for a month. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. There's something
What
that
is
calls you to a connection.
yeah, what is interesting in this book, they refer especially to the 5 prayers a day, and they did an experiment on a Muslim who he prayed in 2 different ways. So he just said the prayer like automatically, like, just do your thing and get it over with.
Mm-hmm.
And then he did it, they said, take it slow and really think about what you're doing. And his brain just went like, boom, when he did it contemplatively.
Yeah.
So there is also how you do it is also important. You can't just like do it as like you brush your teeth.
Right.
It has to be, you have to be in it.
Yeah.
So
He
yeah.
even mentions, and this is probably later, but how people that pair psychedelics with mindfulness practices are going to get
It's
much
here.
more out of it than
Yeah,
just those
yeah,
that trip, you know?
yeah, yeah. So we're talking about the long term, which is meditation, contemplation, and I wrote praise and worship.
Yeah.
And then the short term is what you mentioned, the fasting from food or sex,
Yeah.
sleep, and sound. What we're gonna do,
Yeah.
speaking, which is a
Yeah.
really powerful fasting as well, to fast from speaking, drumming, chanting, and then psychedelics. Um, yeah, and then he says the combination are quite good. Um, because you are priming yourself with these long term, you're preparing yourself. He refers to when you're part of a wisdom tradition and you
Yeah.
do these practices, then you have a completely different experience of psychedelics than you would if you're just tripping at a festival.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, it reminds me too, for whatever reason, this just was like haunting me, but with Catholicism, how you have the confession and then they're like, they give you an assignment. All right, 5 Hail Marys and 4 Our Fathers. And like you go do that. And it's like over, but there's like there's something there. There's something like the repentance And then the punishment, I guess you could say, or the act of doing the thing, the connection. And yeah, it keeps coming back where it's like, it's very similar in pairing that up where you're contemplating over what it is that you're praying for, as opposed to just, I'm going to say the Hail Mary, but there's something to it when it's in combination with my confession.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It seems to be a deep psychological need, the need to confess and to be punished, or to accept punishment for what you did wrong. It seems to be. Jordan Peterson talks about it a lot in relation to Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment. But I read it in Plato also recently. That it's better to, if you've done wrong, to be punished for it, to be purified of what you've done. It's better for your well-being.
I can imagine. Okay, we've gone on a little bit of a tangent there. So I have a brief mention here. There was this thing about egocentric and allocentric, and that's after he says recall onto normativity, which is enhanced realness. So this can be predictive of improvement. So these transformational experiences, he says you can have a release from anxiety, and Yaden has this decentering I don't know too much about Yaden, but this is the name drop, as John typically does for his citations, just like, here, go look at it, but egocentric to allocentric, so first person to third person. But you wanted to make a correction to that.
Well, not a correction. May God prevent me ever from thinking that I am capable of correcting the great John Vervaeke, the learned John Vervaeke. I am very much aware, and not like in a overly humble way, but I'm very much aware of the fact that his learning far exceeds mine. So, but I am adding on to his work by his work, through his work. That's what I'm doing. So the decentering. First one to mention, what you kind of hinted at in the beginning, was de-automization, when you just stop your automatic responses. But the decentering from ego to allocentric, I had to, because I didn't quite get what allocentric mean from what he described it as. So I looked it up. The quote is, having one's interest and attention centered on other persons. That's allocentric. But I was thinking, no, what we really want is what John and Chris writes about in that article that they wrote about dialectic into dialogos, and that is ontocentric, an anthrocentric perspective. That's what we want. Being perspective, not just other persons, because it says explicitly other persons, but being as such. In all its dimensions.
It takes it, I mean, I think that's even more third person than allocentric is. Ontocentric, I think that, I think he would probably make a similar amendment, we could say.
Well, like I said, he wrote it. He wrote ontocentric. I didn't come up with that.
Right. Yeah.
He or Chris, I'm not sure who. The two are so intertwined.
So
now I read the words absorbed in the other. The other becomes more salient than the self. You had a quote about the super salience of the ego.
So he says, salience of reality is finally capable of eclipsing the narcissistic glow of our own ego, and for a moment we get release. Oh, it's so rich with that quote, because we're talking about egocentric, ontocentric, allocentric, but I was describing that there's this thing with astrology being heliocentric versus geocentric. And so even bringing that into this whole idea of salience of reality is finally capable of eclipsing, so this is like an astronomical reference too, the narcissistic glow of our ego, which is oftentimes what the sun is representative of. So there's an eclipse happening here. It's the moon usually that's going to eclipse the sun. And so this like just something about reflection here that's so rich in symbology for me. To extinguish, he says, is what nirvana means, and moksha is to release. So that's very cool.
It's so deep. It's this one sentence. I think one could meditate on this one sentence for the rest of your life. It feels like I have the image of a spoon and then pouring medicine in the spoon, and if you drink it, the sentence is the medicine that you can drink. And we desperately need that medicine in our society.
Oh yeah.
And it also, when I think about what the entrapment, narcissistic entrapment of the glow of your own ego, it feels so trapped, right? It feels so trapped. It's that chains in the cave that you're sitting there. You're not quite. You have no idea you're chained, but your own super salience is keeping you chained.
Yeah.
In this cave.
Yeah, and we'll get like that actually comes up later too with the whole framing. So yeah, we'll get more into that too. I do have this quote that was going to lead us into the next part, which is these higher states have a lot of features of insights. And so we're going to be like talking about how finding coherence can experience meaning in life. So being able to find coherence, these aha moments describe like how people experience meaning in life. And so there's this radical sense of deep intelligibility that we're going to describe with this experiment by Samantha Heiselman. Yeah. So Samantha Heiselman is basically, like, from what I understood, showing scenes, I guess clips of movies, just scenes of, scenes. And then I guess asking people to make sense of their life from that. So I don't know, maybe you have a better way of describing the experiment.
I don't. I got it as she's just showing them pictures and then they have to make sense of what's happening there. But what's coming to mind now is Jordan Peterson's obsession with narration, because that's kind of what we do when we look at our own life, the scenes of our own life, and we make a story out of it. We're finding patterns and the underlying patterns and making sense and finding coherence in our lives. That's what we do when we make stories of our lives. And as I was telling you before we started recording, what I had to think about when I saw this is like how you are making your life more meaningful by looking at the patterns of the planets and making sense of.
I heard you say finding coherence, right? And then, like that's what transit readings in astrology are really all about, is how does this feel? And when these two planets do this thing, how does this feel? And then you have all these archetypes that you can relate to, and it's literally like just reading the list of words, right? We've talked about how like there's lists of words. I forget back a couple episodes, but anyways,
the features and the gestalt, you mean?
Yeah, like features and gestalt. And so there's a connection that you can make with these archetypes for some weird reason. And again, it's like this correlation of when the planets move, we have archetypes that describe them. It's not to say that the gravitational pull of planets is what's affecting us. It's just that time is passing by, and you can be very certain that this planet is going to move at this rate, and so that's real. That's a real pattern that we can pick up on. So anyway, just to say, like, being able to describe these planetary movements in terms of transits, in terms of archetypes, that for some reason works like this experiment. with Samantha Heiselman, where she's showing people images of life, and he says they're not profound pictures. They're not romance, somebody falling in love. It's just like something that they can relate to, and then they find meaning in life. Yeah, it's very similar to what astrology feels like. Because sometimes I'm just like, who's going to be able to relate with this? And people do. That's the weird thing, is like people get called into listening to the message as it pertains to them.
But also you are able to relate to it. And I think that's the important part.
Yeah.
You are able to relate to it, and you're practicing your skills of interpreting patterns and making sense of things, which apparently makes your life feel more meaningful.
Totally. Yeah, I can see it.
Then the sun is being very heliocentric at the moment.
Right? My computer's being very egocentric, honestly. He goes into here from this experiment, like making sense of life, when you ask people after they've seen these not profound images, they feel like they can make sense of their life. And so he goes into this Topolinsky and Reber fluency spike, where there's a significant increase in fluency. So it's almost as if the easier it is to process the information, the more trustworthy it seems, the better it seems. It's perceived as more real in such a case where it's more fluent.
Yeah, if it's more accessible, it seems more real.
Even if the semantic material between two sources is exactly equal, if one's easier to process, it seems more real. Fluency is generally indicative of real patterns, he says. So how much can you zero in on what is relevant? How accessible is the information?
Oh, I missed this when I was watching it, and before we now speak about it, I missed this relevance realization. Boom, that's right been there. Dropped here.
Cloaked.
Yeah. Cloaked relevance realization. Oh. We noticed the pattern, John.
Yes, we saw it. It took a minute, but we got it.
Well, it took interaction, which he would be really happy about. It took talking about it.
Yeah. This, I mean,
dialogos.
Instantly I go back to the desktop. It's like, oh yeah, that one's easiest to, that icon is easy to get to.
Yeah.
So if it's more, if it's the fluency is generally indicative of real patterns. That's so interesting. I mean, it makes a lot of sense too, for like the purpose of like understanding education and instruction. It's like the better somebody understands something, the easier they can describe it to a 5-year-old. If you don't understand something really well, you can't explain it to a 5-year-old. So you have to have this like really profound sense of understanding of something in order to be able to distill it. And this similar way that John's doing it in creating a way for us to speak about it, the ineffable, right?
I'm not sure that a 5-year-old will be able to follow the awakening from the meaning crisis.
You just wait. So we leave that idea of fluency, this fluency spike that Topolinsky and Reber were talking about, where things are perceived as more real because there's significant increase in fluency. So it's just such that because things are easier to digest, they're more fluent, and that makes them more accessible, and therefore, easier to process, more real. So there's go ahead. Yeah,
I wrote, it seems obvious, but that's my own words, not John's words. Some things just seem obvious. And
yeah. And so then we move into this.
But that could be bullshitting as well.
Super salience always gets us. Damn, super salience got me again. Okay, so there's the continuity hypothesis that's gonna kind of help us describe some things, and then I know you have a well, first let's just say this is where you are bringing us in at the beginning of the why are we doing this, for the legitimate explanation of what's going on when someone claims that they've received an insight, and why others should be guided by these experiences. And so he says that fluency gets enhanced into insight. That's how they're so similar. Insight gets enhanced into flow, which can be enhanced into mystical experiences, and which can bring about transformative experiences.
Progressively exapted.
Yeah.
That's the words that I wrote.
I love that. I love this idea of exaptation, which we got from the shaman. From like the very beginning, the shaman or the ability of the shaman was exapted, I guess, because the shaman is using understanding of the wilderness animals, getting into their mind sight. And so this ability is being exapted. Okay, but the same machinery is being used. So that's the idea of exaptation. That same machinery is
it's the tongue. It's a tongue, or the mouth hole, as John always talks about. The face hole. The face hole. So gross. The tongue wasn't meant. It was meant for moving your food around so that you can chew it.
Yeah.
But because of this how the throat is structured, and the windpipe, and everything happens to be like, so the tongue could be exapted for speech. And that's exaptation. It was formed. It formed through evolution to a specific purpose. Help me chew my food.
Yeah.
But it got exapted for speech.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, evolution formed it for one purpose, and now we're using it for another.
Yeah. And so I have here that this continuity hypothesis, that's exactly what it's saying. Like, the exaptation, the same machinery being used, information becomes more and more powerful.
Like I get that fluency, if something stands up, because he says we pick up on real patterns. What is going to stand out to you if you're like a caveman? The tiger.
Yeah.
Tiger burning bright. You're going to notice that tiger.
Yeah.
And so the fluency is kind of like, I get that that's part of, we were evolved for things that are easy to, that is accessible to us to really imprint on us, and that we respond to that. And then that is exapted for insight, which is exapted for flow, which is exapted for
So I have, can afford what is going to be used for rationally justifiable guidance into the kinds of transformation to invoke an awakening experience to cultivate wisdom.
John is basically, and that's what I started off with, he's basically defending himself, and why did he spend so much time and effort and research in these higher states of consciousness himself, because it seems that the continuity hypothesis is his own hypothesis. It is similar, he says, to I think Newberg.
Yep.
Yeah. So they both came up with the hypothesis separately, which usually makes John really super excited if people comes up with an hypothesis apart from him, because then he says it makes it more what is the word, it's more likely to be true if two different people come up with them through their separate research. So
that makes sense. Relevant to this too. Now, I did when we were talking about flow, there was this other book that you had, the Phenomenology of Perceptions, I think.
I'm madly in love with this dude whose name I can't say, Maurice Merleau-Ponty. I do think he's going to be a foundation stone in my own philosophy if I ever get to write my own philosophy. He's just, I love reading him. Also because he sometimes writes so poetically. It's beautiful.
It is. There's the reason that book was coming up was because he's talking about priming the pump and how the more you practice things like mindfulness, these regular insights can induce that transformational experience. And the more you bring about that enhanced connectedness, there's enhanced anagoge.
Well, I think that will relate more to this book, though.
Okay.
The priming of the pump. What Merleau-Ponty is about is the next step, the optimal grip part.
Yeah.
Because Merleau-Ponty, I'm trying to read it and say it is even worse because it's spelled very weirdly. Is about phenomenology. And he was a student of Husserl. And where did I write it? I had such a beautiful definition of phenomenology. Oh, well. Now it's lost.
Okay, while you look for that, it's kind of still leading us into how, like, he's going through that flow chart of fluency to insight to flow to mystical experiences and how those can bring about transformative experiences. And he says the continuity hypothesis can help describe what's going on in the higher states of consciousness. And eventually we can use the very same machinery used in explaining it to justify it. So for flow, expertise can meet the demands because without relevant skills, you can't get in a flow state. So this brings about the question of what expertise is used in higher states.
Yes. And that's when we get into phenomenology.
Yeah.
Because it's the expertise of getting the optimal grip. Of contact epistemology. That is the expertise that is needed for mystical experiences.
Right. So the expertise that's kind of being developed in those mystical experiences.
Well, you also have to have it. Like it's like that's why you need these priming things like meditating or praying, or you need to prime yourself, because if you put someone who hasn't played a saxophone ever on stage, that's not a good idea, and he's most definitely not going to get in the flow state. That's not possible. Right. So you want to be practice in this optimal gripping, so that when you go on a pilgrimage to a holy land and participate in a 3-day ritual, which includes fasting and silence and dancing and chanting, that you're prepared for it.
Yeah. So and this is all like making sense of the world. This is all for making sense of the world. Retrieving realism, which is Dreyfus and Charles Taylor, who and Dreyfus especially takes, I can't think of the word, is influenced heavily by that Merleau-Ponty's work.
Merleau-Ponty.
Yeah.
It's like Monty Python.
I wrote down Monty on here. So yeah, Monty Python is definitely what I was thinking too. So this whole Dreyfus, Charles Taylor, retrieving realism, we're understanding optimal grip. Even like he harkens back to conformity theory with Charles Taylor about what process is being optimized. It's optimal grip. And I love when he goes into this, back to the cup example of understanding the cup, and like you look at it from different ways. And he's saying that you move around it, and that gets you into a trade-off relationship with it to see many details of the cup without losing the sense of gestalt. And I was saying that my approach to gardening has been very similar in that I like the composting. I like it's so like this is something for 15 years now I've been getting into composting. It's been a long, slow, steady process. And it's my favorite part of gardening. I'm a little bit nervous about being in the actual garden. There's so much you can screw up in the actual garden, whereas in the compost, it's processing the garbage.
The idea is to screw it up.
Yeah, exactly. There's like it's very difficult to screw up the composting process. Not to say like I've been attacked by ants. I've been, I'll come home with compost caked into the bottom of my boots. It's a dirty process, but yeah, there's something interesting there, even in that analogy of processing the waste, things that people dispose of, one man's trash. Yeah. Something in there. But to understand the garden, I'm starting on the outskirts of the garden and I'm building a relationship with the garden so that I become the gardener. That would be my arena, is the garden, and then I'm the gardener. So move around it to get better optimization for my needs between the overall and the detail. So features and gestalt again. I have a lot of notes in here. I know that this is kind of like just review, but it's like getting a sense of body in connection with details. So he's talking about martial arts and how getting an optimal grip of your opponent is getting a sense of their body in connection to the details, and then also your stance in your own body and your own connection to your own details. He talks about cats and dogs both being mammals. So there's this default basic level that we get to where that's a dog. Now, some people might be like, that's a cocker spaniel, but that's a dog. This is the basic level of
it's a cognitive optimal grip. He uses the words cognitive optimal grip there.
Yep. Yeah. That default basic level, and that is this is how we get cognitively optimal grip. Okay, and so it's just like a review there of gestalt and features, but definitely worth listening to and worth mentioning, getting a sense of someone on the first date.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I just wrote that, getting a sense of, because that's getting a feel for, getting that, like the optimal grip thing, you do, like your hands automatically starts feeling it out, right?
Yeah.
It's
it is. I mean, this is like the sixth sense, that's what I keep thinking of, is like there's something of that relationship of sensual, receiving it through our sensations. We've talked about supracentral. You mentioned that word. I really like that word. And I think that supracentral really relates with the sixth sense.
What I'm thinking now is we all know so much that we don't know we know. And these are all that, we know how close to stand to a particular person. And I will stand this close to this person, but I will not another person, or to that person, a particular another person. It's not just like, this is how close you always stand to all people.
Right.
It's like, with this person, this is how close I want to be.
Yeah.
And we both feel still comfortable, I hope.
Yeah.
But I think I will also pick it up if the other person doesn't feel comfortable, and then I will move.
Yep.
And how do we know this? We somehow have this optimal grip on reality, I even want to say, but we don't know how.
Yeah. It's so
well, I don't know how. Maybe John knows how.
Maybe. We're just here trying to make sense of this, trying to optimally grip how we optimally grip. Okay, so I think this moves us into disruptive strategies, right? What?
This I can grip.
So, gosh, my internet is just killing me. Okay.
I have the words intensely powerful and intensely revealing written down. I have no idea why.
Yes, but I did too. Cool. Oh, that's funny. I didn't write intensely, but I just wrote powerful and revealing.
No, I like intensely.
No, he just intensely powerful, and this the most comprehensive attempt to make sense through conformity with the world is this higher states. So flowing, disrupting the normal framing and opening up while zeroing in, he says, is the most comprehensive attempt to make sense through conformity with the world. Intensely powerful, intensely revealing. Okay, and then he moves into disruptive strategies, which are important if there is continuity between higher states and things like flow and insights, then these disruptive strategies are important, especially to break bad framing. He briefly mentions here research by Zach Irving, which is his student, that I think is really interesting, because we're hardwired to mind wandering, because it enhances our capacity for insight by distracting us and breaking us from the framing, which is interesting because all the asides that we have in our conversations and how we just kind of mind wander and then we like, whoa. So
yeah, it enhances your capacity for insight.
Yeah, the brain naturally has these strategies for disrupting our framing. And this, of course, takes us back just as a recall to the 9-dot problem, which was breaking the framing of how you approach the problem. To get out of that, we have to de-automatize. You know, with the 9-dot problem, it's like, there's a square, I can connect the dots. But it's like, no, you have to de-automatize that natural instinct to just see a square and increase the variation in processing. So it can be good because it allows greater awareness of what's invariant and so the disruption is good because it allows greater awareness of what's invariant, and we become aware of what's not changing and therefore what is more real.
So I basically everything what you said, but I do like, and I think I wrote down his words word for word: the disruptive machinery that is intricate to insight can be exapted and enhanced to bring about a higher state of consciousness. And I imagine then that is the strategies that he referred to earlier, the fasting and chanting and those things.
Yeah, to de-automatize.
We're going to be doing some next level de-automatization. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's interesting how this idea of de-automatizing also kind of relates with addictions too. Like you automatically go for what it is that you're addicted to. And so like de-automatizing that can really help to have that transformative experience of breaking addiction and getting an optimal grip of what it is that leads you to that addiction, I guess.
I read that or even the context where you are can have like a negative or has an influence. Like soldiers that were addicted to heroin in Vietnam, when they came back, the addiction just stopped. And heroin is not a soft addiction. It's a pretty hard addiction to have.
Yeah.
And it just stopped when they came back because they were de-automized. It was not just a natural thing to. And I have to, every time we say this word de-automization, I have to think about the book Mindside again, because he also keeps emphasizing in your interaction with other people how important it is to de-automize your behavior. Like someone says a word that triggers something and then you just respond. But no, just pause, just breathe and sink into the moment and see the other person. Don't let that magical thing that takes away your narcissistic, egocentric shining, let that dissolve and focus, see the other person, be allocentric. And that is also a very good de-automation strategy for enhancing relationships and your quality of relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. So he says that there are two kinds of invariants when trying to achieve optimal grip on the world. There are good and bad. I was like, wow, that's so uncreative. I was expecting some two profound words, and it's like good or bad.
And I was also surprised by, and he wrote it down, and he said it with such weight, as if it's
Yeah.
such profound things that he said. It's like,
Right.
so there are two, good and bad.
Go on.
Okay, maybe a 5-year-old will be able to understand that part.
Yeah, I think maybe this might be something. Okay, because there's good. Now, it is much more profound than just the word good, because it's like picking up on bigger patterns, the real patterns. So
Real patterns.
changing that are real patterns in the world, deep learning networks. He even goes into like how AI is potentially part of this, whatever. Increased variation to find what's invariant. So you increase the variation and then you find what's invariant. I cannot help but think about genetics, because genetic variation, a larger gene pool, when you introduce the variation into the gene pool, you allow the DNA is allowing itself to experiment. It's like, let me try this, let me try that. Whereas asexual reproduction was a clone and you just get the same thing. And so this very much relating with how we think, like if you're only in your little thought bubble and you stay in your bubble, and even if everybody's just affirming what it is that you say, it's asexual reproduction, but introducing some variation helps you to, the genetic variation helps evolution, helps things evolve.
This is super. So I'm just frozen in awe. Not computer problems. Just frozen in awe. It's just so significant. This seeing the importance of sexual. What do you call it? Sexual
or asexual reproduction. Yeah.
And so much is going through my head, like dialectic into dialogos, joining the Stoa after Socrates to have input other than your own genes.
Yes.
In formulating, and why the next Buddha has to be the Sangha. It's evolution through variation.
I just got chills all through my body. Yeah. It's so interesting. This is all of the things that I learned in undergrad coming back up. And it's so interesting how it didn't seem relevant at the time. I wanted to be a genetic counselor. That was kind of why I was looking into genetics, but all of that stuff still comes back up. And that's something that John says a lot, is how biology is so big and a part of this description. So the words even cross over. So variation, and then that helps you to find what's invariant. And you'll do this with genes too. You can tell which species are most related based on what they have in common. And then you can find, the relatedness, and then you can find like the string of how they evolved. So anyway, this just to say, like, the increase in variation to find what's invariant and therefore what is more real. So this is a good type of invariant when trying to achieve. Yeah, please.
So what comes to mind is it's exacting. It's exacting the biological principles for the spiritual principles. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're reading or seeing anything into it that's not there. That's just how it works. You use biological givens for our psychological way of being.
I mentioned, and you've mentioned before, Dawkins, and memes are like genes.
But genes aren't as funny. But that's not what he originally meant. That's not what he originally meant with memes. So
right. Yeah, memes has become a whole different meme in and of itself. Then there are bad types of invariants, which keep us failing to solve the problem because we haven't changed what actually needed to be changed. And so formulating problems formulating experience is blocking you from solving the problem itself. So it's like bad framing.
Mm. Yeah, there's certain things that's not variant, that's invariant, that keeps the same, whatever. Like I mentioned, I am the invariant thing in every relationship that I have.
Yeah.
So if there's certain patterns in the relationships, it's probably me. I'm the bad invariant.
And that's the thing, is like there's humility in it. He mentions later, like there's humility in this. And I think that is
Yeah.
something that a lot of people could benefit from realizing, is that I had this kind of experience too when I realized that after my breakup, I was experiencing a lot of people that weren't understanding me. And I was like, oh, the common denominator here is that me. I'm the one that's different here. And so, yeah, like
Yeah.
it takes a step back to realize, oh, okay, if everybody's responding to me in a certain way and I don't
Yeah.
like it, who's the common denominator and all that? So, yeah.
Mm. I'm not sure if it's Bernard Shaw or Oscar Wilde or one of the big playwrights have a play where a woman at a party asks a psychiatrist or psychologist, I think. I probably am misquoting this completely, but the moral of the story I know. And she asked him, like, what are the odds that everything that's wrong in my life is my fault? Or is it a fault in the world? And then he kind of asks about, what do you want it to be? And then she says, I'd rather be my fault, because I can change me much easier than I can change the world. So there's also hopefulness in accepting the fact that you're the bad invariant.
Yeah.
That
I
because
agree. Because the only thing we can change is ourselves and the way that we respond to things. So that's actually, it's hopeful.
Yeah. If we were perfect and the world was fucked up, then, well, there's nothing we can do about that. But luckily, we're not perfect. Not quite.
Okay, he mentions here briefly the Kaplan and Simon 1990s heuristic strategy called notice invariance heuristic, which is funny when he says it, because it's like it sounds like different words. You have to actually read notice invariance heuristic. What am I not changing? In all of the failures, what is it that I'm not changing? That's how you can notice the invariant.
Yeah, the system of errors. Systematic error, like the child. And he comes back to the child with the candy.
Yeah. So the thing we don't change is likely what we need to change, helping to break bad framing that has caused failure in the past. And we just said it requires humility, requires that we pay attention, and that we actually remember the failures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because what if it's not just one error, but a whole system of errors, which is, in cognitive development with the 4-year-old. They weren't just making this mistake with the candies. They're making this mistake with height, determining height or whatever, by seeing the space in between things as relevant to its quantity. And then realizing, oh, there's a whole frame shift here once you realize that the non-candy space isn't relevant to whether or not I want this line or this line of candies. So he says they have to go through a developmental change. They find a systematic pattern of errors, and they find an insight that's not just pertaining to one problem, but an insight that applies systematically to all interconnected, interrelated errors. They cognitively grow up. This could be what's going on in enlightenment, which is seeing through illusion.
Lovely.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good.
Well, do you have anything to add before you take us out?
No, I am quite speechless.
Me too.
And yes.
Love it.
Next time we speak, we will probably be able to speak about higher states of consciousness from, more personal experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Whoa. I don't know what you signed me up for here.
How synchronistic is this? That between our pilgrimage,
Yeah.
we do our pilgrimage between part 1 and
Right.
part 2 of
Yeah.
higher states of consciousness.
So tell me that wasn't planned with your fixed fate here. I'm just along for the ride trying to figure out what the fuck's going on.
I'm just around for the ride trying to find out what the fuck's going on.
It's great. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, it is enjoyable. What a
Enjoyable.
ride.
I enjoy. Yeah.
Yes. I've had a moment of pure joy. That was awesome.
Mm.
Spinoza says love is it when an external object causes joy. Something like that. I'm also probably misquoting, but that's the idea.
You got another William Blake for us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shall I go?
Yeah.
So it's the same poem, Auguries of Innocence. And notice that the first part ended on judgment, the card. So, he who mocks the infant's faith shall be mocked in age and death. He who shall teach the child to doubt, the rotting grave shall never get out. He who respects the infant's faith triumphs over hell and death. The child's toys and the old man's reasons are the fruits of the 2 seasons. The questioner who sits so sly never shall know how to reply. He who replies to words of doubt doth put the light of knowledge out. He who doubts from what he sees will never believe, do what you please. If the sun and moon should doubt, they'd immediately go out. To be in a passion you good may do, but no good if a passion is in you. The whore and the gambler, by the state, licensed build the nation's fate. The harlot's cry from street to street shall weave old England's winding sheet. The winners shout, the losers curse, dance before dead England's hearse. Every night and every morn, some to misery are born. Every morn and every night, some are born to sweet delight. Some are born to sweet delight, some are born to endless night. We are led to believe a lie when we see with, not through, the eye, which was born in a night to perish in a night, when the soul sleeps in beams of light. God appears, and God is light to those poor souls who dwell in night. But does a human form display to those who dwell in realms of day?
It's nice to hear the whole thing.
Yes. It deserves to be heard in its entirety.
Yes. Beautiful. Okay, well, I guess that takes us out. And a reminder to join us for the Stoa after Socrates, noon,
Yes.
Noon Eastern time, Toronto time, I think.
I always say Toronto time.
Yeah.
So the plan is we will start practicing dialectic into dialogos and philosophical fellowship, but not together because we don't have that much time. One week this and 1 week the other.
Cool.
So we will be sexually reproducing.
Sexually reproducing instead of asexually cloning ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. Nice. And that's Sundays. So join us there to really start practicing. It's so funny. Yeah. It's even more practice for us. We get this nice personal interaction of practice, but it's still that beautiful there too. You just can't describe what talking about this stuff does to your brain. This is your brain on Vervaeke. All right.
Best high I've ever had. Really.
Same. It's doing some weird things, I just gotta say. Okay, well, as always, yeah, I appreciate this conversation, and we'll be back.
Me too.
A couple weeks, completely changed. You won't recognize us. Take care.